Hello YouTubers, gamers and fellow hobbyists out there, and welcome to this series called Hobby 1-to-1. Now this is a series designed for complete beginners who are starting the hobby or are thinking of starting the hobby of miniature wargaming, miniature painting, miniature building. It all involves and encompasses the same thing really, and a lot of the techniques and things that you need to know, the knowledge, applies to all areas of this hobby. So I've picked up a few things along the way. Now I must say this video is for complete beginners, so bear that in mind. If you're not a beginner, this probably isn't the video or series for you. But I remember when I first started out in the hobby, I didn't know a darn thing. So like I say, I've picked up a few things along the way, and I'd like to share them with you. So let's get started. So the first thing you're going to need is an area in which to work, to build, to model and to paint. Now wherever this may be. To build, what I recommend you do is you get yourself something to build your models on. Now you can get these little cutting mats, as you can see, some quite small, but they come in various sizes, so you can get slightly bigger ones and bigger and bigger and bigger. Or if you don't have that, you can use a magazine or some newspaper to work on. Now, if you want to be super fancy, you can pick yourself up a workstation or a modelling station or a painting station. They come in various names, shapes and sizes. This one here is a Citadel one. As you can see, it's a little bit messy. I've got a larger cutting mat underneath it. I've got quite a few cutting mats actually, but I'm just pointing out you need an area that you're going to work in, whether you have a base of operations that you can go to, like a spare room or an area of the house that you can have set up full time, or it's a case of you have to pack your stuff away each and every time perhaps you're working on the kitchen table or something like that. But we'll come to all that in due course. So why do you need a cutting mat or a specialized work area? Well, as you can see by the state of my painting desk there, actually it's one I don't use very often now, but it's what I got when I first started out in the hobby. But like I say, as you can see, it's quite messy. Not only that, it's quite dangerous if you're cutting things with sharp knives and that, which we will come on to in a moment as we go through everything we need, because what we are going to be talking about is basically the tools of the trade. What you need to get going, and what you can add to your repertoire of tools, and what they're used for. Okay, now it's going to sound a little obvious, but of course you are going to need miniatures. And these come in all variety, all manner of shapes and sizes. You can get single models, boxes of models, you know, varying price ranges too. Like, you know, you've got these Lord of the Rings dwarven rangers here, these Warhammer dwarves for instance, big box of models there. Of course they're single models each. You could go for a tank, probably not the best idea to start with. You've got metal miniatures, resin miniatures, plastic miniatures, which come in all these different varieties here, big ones, small ones, buildings, and MDF models. Now that's a different ball game altogether, but it's a part of the hobby. But don't worry, we'll come to that all in due course. Now what we have here are some trees on a piece of MDF, homemade. This is the homemade section, terrain you make yourself, and you can call it scattered terrain. There are different terminologies for it, which we'll cover in the course of the videos. This here is a monkey head made from clay, a type of clay. Again, we'll come to that all in due course. Rather nice. I made it for Congo actually, but and last but not least, terrain made from garbage or rubbish terrain, stuff that you would normally throw away. So I mean, I think you can make some awesome looking terrain pieces using rubbish, but don't be disheartened or worried. I got your back, and we'll cover all aspects of the terrain as well. So modelling will encompass terrain, the models, and eventually the painting. Okay, now some models come individually wrapped on their own, don't need putting together, they're all a complete unit, and that's okay. However, they still will need preparation, which we'll come on to in just a moment. But others, such as boxes of models or models that need assembly, come on as things called sprues. Now this is a sprue, what you see before you, and in order to get the little pieces off of the sprue, what you will need is some cutters. Now before I show you those, don't twist the little bits off, which I used to do years ago. I just used to grab hold of the piece in question and twist it and twiddle it and pull it until it came off the sprue. I know, cringe-worthy stuff, but there's a better way. And so now we come on to the tools of the trade. Now these are cutters. The first thing you will need to remove the pieces of the model from the sprue. These are just 3 different ones that I have here. You can get all manner of ones, some really expensive. You don't need the really expensive ones. You can go into the cheaper stores, cheaper tool stores, even pound shops, and pick up things like this. Now the one on the left is the old Citadel one, the one in the middle is a generic one, and the one on the right is a generic one. I suppose the one on the left is about twice the price of the other two, but they are all the same quality, these here. I paid about £5 for the ones on the right, or the middle one and the one on the right, and that's all you really need. The only difference really is how long they remain sharp. Basically, when they start getting blunt, then they're only really useful for terrain making and stuff like that. The next thing I recommend you get yourself is a hobby knife or X-Acto blade. They come in all shapes and sizes as well. The one on the bottom is a Citadel one, and the other 2 are generic. The top one being really cheap. That one came in a pack of, I don't know, like half a dozen for a couple of quid. And the one in the middle I got from my local tool store for about £3, I believe. Again, as long as the blade is sharp, that's all that matters. Always be wary of using these sharp implements, and this is the main reason you need a cutting mat, because when you're cutting bits off, now yes, you cut the bits off the sprue, but they sometimes leave little bits of plastic or whatever behind, and the only way to really get rid of those little nodules and things is with a cutting blade of some description, and they can slip. But a cutting mat, they're all self-healing, these cutting mats, so you can cut it as many times as you like, it just goes back together again. And but yeah, so that's the next thing you will need in your tools. Once you've done that, you will notice little lines on the pieces that you've cut out, called mold lines. They call them mold lines, and this is a picture of 2 mold line removers, both from Citadel. Now these, you scrape along the mold line and it actually removes the mold line, and they are absolutely brilliant. I recommend them as an essential part of your modelling tool kit, so definitely get yourself some mold line removers. Other ways to remove these mold lines is to file them. Now that is just an ordinary nail file, which I borrowed my wife's when I first started. Well, borrowed, kind of took until I got myself a set of actual proper files. You can get these quite cheap as well. You pick them off of eBay, and they come in all shapes and sizes, of course. Now what a lot of people do is use the flat of the blade of their hobby knife to get rid of the mold lines, but I'm not keen on that, so I do recommend using mold line removers. I'll come back to that because they are my favourite method of removing them. Okay, the types of glue you will need to do your modelling. There's 2 main types, or the most common ones. The one on the right is super glue, as indicated by the Gorilla Glue there, and the one on the left, which is plastic glue, or also known as poly cement. I've got the Humbrol one there. This is PVA glue, or wood glue, or Elmer's glue. It's all the same thing. That you will need for working with wood or MDF models, but we'll come on to that later. Okay, pin vices, or our little hand drills, they're useful for drilling out barrels of guns or drilling holes into the bottom of models so that you can pin like paper clips and things to hold them through a model holder of some description. Again, we'll come on to that later. Right, so before we move on, just a quick recap on the two main types of glue. The reason I said two main types because most people, when they start the modelling, they're getting either plastic models or metal models, usually. And, well, to glue metal models, you're going to need super glue, pure and simple. And so obviously the one on the right or something like that. But for plastic models, I mean, you can use super glue. But for plastic models, poly cement is the best, really, I find. Although some people prefer super glue, but plastic glue is better to work with. I mean, it doesn't stick your skin together to the point where you need surgical, removal, and it actually melts the two plastic contact points together to form a really strong bond. Stronger than super glue. But for metal models, where you're gluing metal arms and legs together and so on, plastic glue will have no effect on that. So super glue is the way to go. And as you can see there, just what I'd mentioned, I like to use the gel because it doesn't move around quite so much as it's drying. Although you can get, glue activators. I may talk about that on another video, but we don't need to worry about that. But so for now, that's the two reasons behind it. Okay, this is something called green stuff. This is something you will need as part of your preparation equipment. Now, this is like an epoxy resin type stuff. It's like feels like plasticine when you get it, and you got the green and the yellowy kind of luminous green and the blue elements of it together. It's best to actually buy it separately, but you get it like this. If you get it like this, you've got to use it fairly quickly, otherwise it starts to go hard. Basically, one makes the other go hard. It changes colour. You break off a bit, you squish it around together and keep squishing it until it goes green, very green, and then you use it to fill gaps and holes and stuff like that in your models. Or you can use it to cast new arms or legs or things like that. It's actually, when you get quite good at it, it's very, very handy. Citadel actually make a product called liquid green stuff, which is already in a soft state, which you can even use with an old brush to brush into the areas, or as it goes slightly harder, you can use sculpting tools to maneuver it around, such as this. Now, these are sculpting tools that I picked up from eBay. They're just like, typical generic, the sort you get, but you pick out the green stuff, you can manipulate it around, maneuver it into gaps, or like I say, you can use brushes to do that. The sculpting tools are more for the green stuff itself that you kind of physically squish together. You can use it. I mean, I've seen some really clever sculpting where people have actually made their own figures by green stuff, so that would be another area for that, but that's not exactly the beginner stuff, but it's still very, very handy for the beginner. Right, the wire brush is something you will need to help prepare your metal miniatures. They scrape off all the little bits of detritus from the model itself after you've kind of picked around and cut off all the main areas. They're very, very handy for metal models. Another thing you will need is a pair of tweezers, very handy for the finicky little bits, mostly on the little plastic models. Surprisingly, on a lot of the larger tanks, you'll get the odd very small detail bits of plastic, which are very, very difficult to distinguish between bits you would normally throw away. I mean, we'll come on to building on another video, but definitely get yourself a pair of tweezers, or these are like fine tweezers, and trust me, you will need them. Other things which are handy, such as this Citadel brush for brushing off the sprues, ordinary brushes which you are going to need for painting and modelling, you're definitely going to need to get yourself some of those. We'll come on to those in another video as well. Also, you'll need a steel rule and a hot glue gun for future endeavours. But where are you going to put all this stuff, I hear you ask? Aha! You're going to need to get yourself some sort of carry box or hobby box, like a fishing box or something like that. That's what I used for the longest time, keeping all my stuff and bits and bobs in there as I either moved around and hobbied wherever, or just to store it away, and that's a nice and easy solution. Or you can pick yourself up a couple of ice cream cartons like that, which I still use, and just keep your stuff in there. That's also perfectly fine. Okay, last but by no means least, this is a visual representation, of course, but it's actually also a physical thing, something I have to have when I model. But it's representative of good visuals, of course, and this also encompasses good lighting. I can't emphasize enough, if you're hobbying, don't do it in a poorly lit area. Make sure you've got good lighting and you can see clearly what you are doing. Now, it may seem obvious, but when I first started modeling, I started painting, like I was painting some space marines and whatever, and I was doing that, and I was finding it very, very difficult, and I couldn't understand why. The reason is I needed glasses for close-up work, and I didn't realize it, and it made my life so much easier. I cannot emphasize that enough. So if you're slightly older, perhaps you may need glasses for close work, or even if you're younger, you might do. It's just one of those things. But if you want to see the fine detail and make things easier for yourself, make sure you can see very well. You need to see exceptionally well to do fine detail work, and it makes the whole hobby experience that much more enjoyable. Well, I hope you have enjoyed that video. Don't be too put off by all the stuff though. To be honest, what you need to get going basically are the models, obviously, the glues and cutters and a knife. Just make sure you've got somewhere safe that you can practice your hobby at. But all the other stuff really just makes life that much easier and the hobby that much more enjoyable. But yes, hopefully this will be a series that will continue into the future as I hobby one-to-one with you guys who are just starting out. So thank you for joining me, and I will be posting other videos on hobbying in general, but it will all be based around beginner type entry. So thanks for joining me. Remember, all brushes lead to war, and bye for now, folks. Bye bye. Hey guys, thanks for watching once again. If you fancy supporting me and this channel, you can do so by checking out my Patreon page, and click on the link which will appear or in the video description below. Either way is fine, or just share the video and like the video and subscribe and all that other YouTube goodness, and I'll see you around. Bye.